So a very warm welcome to State of Digital Publishing's PubTech 2023 event. We're thrilled that you've all joined us to explore the latest AI, SEO, advertising collaboration trend shaping the digital publishing landscape. We've got a packed agenda today that should provide you with some valuable insights into these trends and also hopefully equip you with the knowledge needed to navigate what is an ever-changing landscape. And hopefully, whether you're a seasoned professional or a rising star in the industry, there should be something for everyone here at PubTech 2023. None of this would be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. And we'd like to extend our deepest gratitude to them for their belief in knowledge sharing events such as these. I think it's vital for the industry to be able to come together and share insights and experiences so that we all get to grow together. So again, big shout out, big thank you. I think we're ready to begin with our first presentation. So I'm now going to officially hand the baton over to Vahe so that you can introduce our first speaker, Khalil Cassimally, and the two of them will be exploring our first session on the state of publishing tech, which I'm very excited to hear about. So without further ado from me, I will hand over to our moderator, our speaker, and invite them to have a very industrious session. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks everyone again for joining us, and Khalil for your part with this conversation. So with just to give a brief synopsis for everyone who's on our session, with the state of PubTech, I'm going to be more talking about the industry sort of background, what's going on a little bit, and we want to, Khalil and I, when we spoke about this session together, we wanted to bring this as a point to leave you with an actionable step that you can take to move forward. As well, as much as these changes have happened. So just to keep you on your hooks, Khalil's going to be going through a framework, a specific framework that a user framework that he's been adopting in the conversation, and we'll leave it at that for now. But let's jump straight into the session. So let's look back. If you want to compare I mean, the main point of reference, and I think there's a lot of resources and articles online about trends. We've covered our own mini series as well, but if we look at the benchmark of the Reuters research piece in the beginning of the year, they had like 8 key points about what was going to happen throughout the year. So I've put here some of the key points here, and just wanted to balance check and see whether or not those things are happened or haven't happened. So has there been a shift to audio and video? Yes, there has, 100%. As more as more of that has become discoverable, indexable, which we'll go through a little bit more in detail, a lot of that has definitely been continuing to shift, and new gen audiences have contributed to that as well. Has generative AI brought a breakthrough year for AI media publishing? Not so much 100%, but indirectly it has. To break it down, like, there's actually a study as well that I found today that a solution provider called Originally.ai, they did the analysis, and they found that from the 135 high traffic sites that they've analyzed, 65% of them have already adopted AI in their content. So some of them have incorporated summaries, some of them have actually done blatant production of that content using AI, generative AI. And yes, there's been a lot of flack for that. But I think where I see indirectly is that it's gotten people to think more about productivity, efficiencies. It's also triggered social search to become more on a level. So it's allowed social search to become more of a level playing field with other channels. So social search, referring to with YouTube, with search itself, tapping into social media and making that all encompassing. It's definitely starting to make a leeway or a headway towards that. Have tech platforms suffered hubris? Yes, they have, because you can see that the likes of Facebook, as everyone knows, we've all been seeing this, that declining of referral traffic has been continually going down. And instead of innovating a little bit on those platforms, I mean, because of the proliferation, I mean, particularly with Meta, the proliferation of their different products have resulted in them just to focus on the ones that have been working and not sort of cater to the other ones. So, and also we've seen the likes of Twitter with more of the direct approach that they're trying to take with the Chinese platform, the comparison to that, trying to make that more of a all-in-one platform. A lot of them are just biding their time to develop their own and continue to develop their own ecosystems, whether or not it's a benefit or not to us or not. So that's still happening. That's resulting in frustrations with publishers as they continue to try to see these new products, how they're going to continue to shift towards creating products that cater towards the audiences that are on those own platforms. So that's still happening, unfortunately. Is there a premium inventory and subscriber value optimism that we saw in the beginning of the year? No, but there's a lot of resilience. So what I mean by that is that when I was also in the beginning of the year working at the publishing show in London, a lot of people were talking about how, you know, besides there being reader fatigue, there are going to be more loyal audiences that are going to be willing to purchase a lot more for particular items. They're going to also publishers were offering a lot more different options with ad inventory to create premium options that would then increase the overall average value size. But if ad budgets are cut, then that also impacts the impact that publishers have towards creating and commanding more premium. So I guess that there has been resilience in that. Longer term relationships have prevailed, but in the shorter term, there has been some more shorter cuts, particularly as there's been the concerns about recession and inflation and economic macro trends. But let's look at the key three trends. I like the power of three because it helps bring things into more perspective. But what has really come about from mid to end of this year that's become more obvious, that I think that hasn't been really discussed in many other places in the media, including in other media publications. The first thing is privacy tech. It has also come to age. In the background, you know, we've had a lot of consistent pushback on the timelines with Google and Chrome with depreciating third-party cookies, but they now have a clear timeline in that by the end of this year, beginning of next year, they're going to start testing to depreciate the third-party cookies, and then they're going to commit to actually removing them. And that's actually coming towards being able to develop ad tech through API on various components that instead of having ad tech providers and PubTech providers own that data, it's actually going to be stored within the browser, and then it's going to be passed through to us, the publishers, to then have that anonymized and being compliant with various legal frameworks like GDPR and so forth. So you can see that there's signals around web spam, content ads, and cross-site boundaries in terms of countries, and how there's various components are going to become the criteria to evaluate a more safe and private web, which I think is going to be a key platform to then maybe realizing, you know, the utopia of Web 3.0. So you can see here that most of it's already coming into availability, and many of the partners, ad tech and PubTech partners, already have adopted these technologies in their ad tech stack. So please understand that so that you can ask the same questions to your third-party providers. The second trend is the YouTubeification of everything. I think people have taken an understanding that, you know, because of YouTube, TikTok being so popular, that everything we're doing is being copied, being influenced by them. But TikTok is seeing the longer term game here. On the right-hand corner, you can see here that there was a recent article a few days ago, actually, from the information sharing that TikTok is continuing to experiment with having longer form videos. There's two key reasons for this. YouTube has a couple of years ago realized the intimate in-person format that they have with how people were so much gamifying the algorithms to get more viewerships, and then people tweaking the content formats for that. So there's a lot more maturation for that, despite shorts and stuff not having a lot more monetization yet. And so TikTok sees the potential in that, because also they're also trying to compete for their space and share of desktop and platform searches, because now that Google has incorporated them in the search results, decided to incorporate them, naturally they want to become more visible, and also realizing as well that it's not going to be the same way a long time ago where people actually are going to spend hours reading a book or text. People are literally spending time to produce videos for those same things and watch it for long hours and periods as well. So that's the YouTube has impacted in many facets of our pop culture and our way of life. And I think that's TikTok is actually continuing to take the long-term game into taking their share rather than the opposite. And then a shift towards topic and intent discovery, not discoverability. So everyone's been pretty much hardcore hit with the helpful content update, particularly from April towards, and then particularly more so in August. And basically Search Generative Experience and Google Bard, in terms of having a lot of those things, providing the answers within the search results, whether it's whatever format it is and whatever query intent it is, has impacted traffic and the type of sites that are ranking. And I'll leave more of the nuances of that in our last session. But why I said discoverability is because AI has actually helped the search come to the same level playing field as how TikTok and YouTube and a lot of those social platforms have the recommendation engines really working well for them to continue the consumption on their website. And so for us, it's not so much to say that search is doomed and no longer going to work for us. It's actually flipping the same mindset as we have for those other channels and saying, well, okay, if I have content that's really, really good and my brand is trusted, is that going to then result into people clicking through to the website? Because there's always going to be delineation with some of the answers and then the trusted sources and sort of going through more deeper into that. So I think there's a lot there that you need to flip the mindset of, and we can talk about that a bit more afterwards. But to be more specific as well, like why are these things more important in a meta sense? Browsers are actually the catalyst of improving any tech stack and standardization of the web, and at the moment still. And I think privacy tech is the key aspect of that. So make sure that you evaluate that with your existing products and solutions. Video is having its moment, and definitely it's something that we can now more reliably utilize, instead of back in the day where there was back in the day where it was more finicky and platforms then switched over the priorities. And then the final point is being able to really consider your brand building initiatives and focusing more on that, and then centering the content as your mode towards providing value to your audience is resulting them to build the trust with you, the first perspectives that you have with your content, to then result in people to then recommend you and consume your content as well. So all these are the reasons why they're important. So I'll hand it over to Khalil now with more of the reasons why some of those trends didn't work and sort of the frameworks we can move forward towards using. Over to you, Khalil.
Hi, Vahe. Thanks for having me. So I should share my screen, right? Let me do this.
Yeah.
All right, you can see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so I guess I kind of want to talk a bit about, Vahe presented, changes that are happening, trends that are happening maybe as well. Ultimately, I guess for us, we sort of want to take action, right? So we know those things are happening, we're seeing those things happen. So what can we do? And I know, many people think about this in different ways and have their own processes. What I tend to think is, if we can anchor every decision that we make on the audiences and be valuable to those audiences, that also kind of works for us, right? So just to, I guess, take a step back, and then I'll kind of go into a framework that we've used to anchor into audiences. But just to take a step back, I think anchoring in audiences and listening to audiences and being more valuable to audiences is something that, as an industry, we need to very urgently get much better at. Those things, those 3 points on the slide is probably not going to surprise you. You've probably seen this, but there's so many proxies that are showing that as an industry, maybe we're not serving our audiences as well as we probably should. And that kind of links to all the market forces changes that we're seeing, which Vahe kind of talked about a bit, because if we're not anchoring into the audiences, if we're not thinking about how to be valuable to audiences as much, it becomes, I think, quite difficult to then be able to act in an efficient and proper way when things are changing. So with that in mind, in terms of anchoring the audiences, being more valuable to audiences, I think I always kind of come back to this and can mean different things to different people, but just giving people value in whatever form, I think is the way forward. And this is something that maybe we've not been doing as much as we should. So how can we be valuable to people? Focusing on their needs, focusing on the problems they have, focusing on their interest. But I'll just kind of focus on the needs today, because that's the framework I want to talk about. So it's the user needs framework, right? And one of the big appeals to it is you can basically just use the model straight away. You don't necessarily need to do too much, or even any, in some cases, audience research on your end. This is a model that you can use within your newsroom that focuses your content production, but also maybe your product work going forward around needs of the audiences, so around the audiences. And the entire aim of the model, of the framework, is to be valuable to audiences by catering or serving their needs. So what is user needs? So I guess before I go into different user needs, just a bit of context about the user needs. So it kind of came out from BBC World Service, I want to say like 15 years ago or so now. So basically they did a massive bit of research with audiences in, so many different markets that they're in. And they realized that irrespective of where people are, irrespective of the markets they're in, there were similar needs, right? So people don't just come to a news website, to a news publisher to be educated or to get the latest news. They realize that people also come for other reasons. They have other needs. So you can see, give me perspective is one of the other needs, for example. So people come to, get challenging ideas, read about challenging ideas to broaden their horizons. People come to be motivated as well. So, they want to be inspired. They want to be able to take action. And actually on the motivate me one, you can potentially see how Google is now maybe moving in that direction a bit more with things like perspectives, more instruction videos, all that kind of stuff in search results as well. But this is something that, people come to news organizations for as well. And it's traditionally, in my experience, motivate me is one of the needs that maybe we serve the least in our newsrooms, but that's where the needs are actually quite high from audiences. And I'll show you a couple of graphs as well. But yeah, so the user needs research kind of came out from the BBC, and then I showed you 3 needs, but obviously there are more needs, and you can kind of just Google it and you can read all the different stuff as well. But this is, so why should you use user needs? Well, because it works, right? It worked at the BBC. You can see, for BBC Russia, Russian content specifically, they applied user needs, and within 5 years, they started getting, much better results, right? Because they started focusing on producing content that addresses the needs of their audiences. We did something at the conversation. So at the conversation, actually, we are in the process of really implementing the user needs in our newsrooms in different parts of the world. So we've got 8 or 9 newsrooms in different parts of the world. We started implementing this in the UK newsroom. So the UK newsroom now, every kind of commissioning process starts with deciding what user need we want to serve with this particular commission, with this particular article, right? And the cool thing from an editorial perspective is user need doesn't tell you what you should cover, right? So it's not going to tell you you should cover this war or you should not cover this news. This is entirely left to the to editorial. So, right, so journalists know what they need to cover. User needs only kind of gives the angle, right, and the perspective through which it could be good to cover whatever we want to cover, right? So address those needs. That's the angle to cover whatever stories. So as I said at the conversation, one of the things that we've done with user needs is use it to really be more valuable to a young professional segment audience. And you can see, 50 to 55% greater engagement just because we started focusing on the needs of that audience, and 15 to 20% more views as well. So just two examples of many of how user needs framework work in different news organizations. And it's being used in, as I said, many news organizations, from Vox to The Atlantic to the New York Times, although the New York Times doesn't refer it to the user needs, but it's very similar. BuzzFeed had loads of needs as well that they had identified. But yeah, basically loads and loads of media organizations are now using user needs to be more valuable to their audiences. So TLDR, it works. So if this is appealing, if you want to learn more, again, I would encourage you to kind of Google user needs to kind of know more about it. But really getting started is also, or the ease of getting started is also one of the reasons why the user needs framework is like really so good, in my opinion. As I said earlier, you can do user research if you have the resources, if you have the capabilities to do it, and that definitely helps. But if you don't have the resources yet, or if maybe you don't want to commit to resources for audience research just yet, try just using the user needs framework, so it's the user needs 2.0 framework. What you basically need to do is, so the idea is you audit the content that you've already published. You basically match every article, or a sample, pretty large sample would be good, of your articles that you've already published, match them with the different user needs that are part of the framework. Once you do this, you can then match the user needs or attribute the user needs to whatever KPIs you are looking at, whether that's page views, whether that's proxies for engagement, conversions, whatever. But basically what you start seeing is where the value of each user need actually lies, right? So let me show you some graphs. So this is from the French newsroom, the newsroom in France of the conversation. And you see the user needs are slightly different. So they did their user research and they came up with their own user needs. And you see the user needs here on the x-axis. So deciphering, escape, explanation, what's new, solution. Those are kind of the user needs that they're catering for. And this is basically what they did, right? So if you look at the graph on the left, for example, they matched the different user needs with page views and the number of articles that they published. So what this graph on the left is showing you is, if you look at solution, the solution need, for example, they published loads of articles, so 15 articles, but in terms of page views, not getting that much traffic, right? So from this, you can maybe argue that, well, maybe the newsroom is publishing too much solution content. Maybe it should focus instead on what's new, because what's new is getting loads of page views. Now, that's a very simplistic conclusion based on this graph, right? So it's just number of articles to page views. But when you start looking at other proxies, you can make even more informed decisions about your content strategy. right? So the graph on the left is page views, the graph on the left, on the right is time spent on page, and engagement proxy. So the more you kind of look into those things, the more you might see basically a mismatch between the content production of your newsroom and addressing the needs of the audiences. And that's the core of it here. If there is a mismatch, it probably means that we're not necessarily serving the audience's needs as much as we can. We are putting resources on over-serving some needs that maybe, the needs exist, right? But maybe they're not as high a priority for audiences as others. So that becomes really, really, that's kind of a really easy way to get going. And it will give you insight that you can act on very quickly, right? Now, one thing I should say is the most time-consuming part of this process is when you're tagging the content. So as I said, you have to go through all articles and tag the content. But Smart Octo, which is an analytics suite, they are working on an AI kind of tool that does that tagging of articles into user needs automatically. I haven't really played with it, but I think initial results are quite good. So again, that's something that you can maybe test out, and it should speed up that process quite a lot. So that's about user needs and content. But obviously, you can use user needs for products as well. And just a very simple example here of the Imagine newsletter, the conversation, which is the climate newsletter. And you see that we did the same thing, but for the newsletters, right? So we attributed the articles published in the newsletters with the user needs, and then we compared them with open rate. And as you can see, keep me on trend user need. We didn't publish that many articles, but open rate is quite high. And if we hypothesize that open rate is a proxy for interest or engagement, then what this graph maybe tells us is, well, maybe in the future, we should focus more on those keep me on trend articles for Imagine newsletters, because those are probably the more the need that is more valuable to the audience. So again, tag, do the graph, you get insights very quickly that you can act on. I think the slides will be shared with you, but if you want to kind of go a bit bigger, this is a kind of a template, I guess, of how you can really focus on audiences when you're thinking about content or when you're thinking about products. It includes user needs, but it puts user needs in a much wider piece of work that you can also do going forward. And finally, in addition to all those benefits of user needs, what we found at the conversation is it was really good in terms of not just the benefit to the audiences, but also internally within the newsroom. It shifted the discussion from output, so we're going to publish X number of articles, or we're going to publish Y number of articles across this topic, to more what impact do we want to have on people, right? We want to educate them, we want to give them perspective, we want to motivate them to take action. That's really about impact of our journalism. And as user needs kind of goes not just around editorial and audience, but also seeps through products, seeps through engineering, etc., it really provides a common language for the functional groups within the organization. And that, as we know, is always really helpful and helps align all the work going forward. That's it for me. Happy to take questions if we have time, but also, hit me up on LinkedIn or anywhere if you want to chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Khalil. Yeah, so probably just on time at the moment. So what we'll do is we'll pass along your detail. We'll share the deck, and if there's any questions, we'll pass along to you, or we can also loop you in the conversation. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to introduce the second session. Andrew is managing editor SODP. He's running the conversation on editorial workflow optimization for better content experiences. And with our panelists, we have Mili Semlani from E27, the head of content and community, and Binoy sorry for my mispronunciation. Prabhakar from the Hindustan Times Digital. Welcome, guys. And I'll pass it over to Andrew.
Okay, thanks, Vahe. Yeah, I just wanted to basically, I'll avoid trying to steal too much oxygen in the room, and I'll just briefly cover what we're going to be talking about today. As Vahe mentioned, we're going to be discussing editorial workflow optimization, for content value and content optimization. The reason we're talking about that today, I think, is I think in the last year, I think anyone can see just from the arrival of generative AI and blowing up in a big space. I mean, but AI has been around in the publishing industry for the past decade, and we're seeing this constant evolution in the landscape. And there's so many other challenges when it comes to what goes on for editorial departments. It's not just commissioning stories, publishing stories. There's other concerns going on in the background. And this is a great opportunity to actually, speak to a couple of leaders in the space, pick their brains, gain insight and understanding from their learnings and their experience. So before I dive in or invite them to actually introduce themselves a little bit, I do actually want to remind all attendees that there's an opportunity here to ask your questions in the Q&A panel at the bottom of the screen. They're being curated in the background by Saida, our hard-working industrious head of marketing. She's in the background making sure everything works there. So please do ask your questions. I'll be asking my own questions over the course of this panel. But without further ado, and without taking up too much time, I would like to ask our first guest, Mili Semlani, to introduce herself and give us a little bit of her professional background.
Thanks, Andrew, and hello, everyone. Really excited to be here. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, considering we're all dialing in from different places. So my name's Mili. I've spent about a decade moving away from being a journalist to really working with newsrooms, digitally transforming their operations. So I've always been excited about new tools, new technologies that are coming in. And personally, I feel the news industry is kind of one of the slowest to embrace change. And rightfully so. We do something that has a lot of responsibility, and we always want to be wary of how new tools are impacting it. Currently, I work with E27, and we cater to the tech ecosystem in Southeast Asia. So we work with a lot of business industry folks, startups, founders, investors, etc. And given that we are in the middle of all the action of where technology is, we've been trying and experimenting with a lot of different tools and optimizing our newsroom workflow to find the balance between how we can be objective, accurate, factual, just like we're always expected to be, but also innovative, cutting edge, and creative to serve our audience that is so much more tech hungry. So I'm really keen to talk a lot about my experiences. Feel free to use the chat box and ask me just about anything related to my career, digital transformation, newsrooms, what's coming. I may not have all the answers, but I'm definitely sure that between us, all of us talking about these things constantly, we'll learn a lot from each other. Thanks, Andrew.
Thanks, Mili. And I'd like to invite our second panelist, Binoy Prabhakar, to introduce himself.
Thanks, Andrew. Hi, everyone. My name is Binoy Prabhakar. I've been a journalist for more than 2 decades. 17 of those years I spent as a print journalist, and the last 6 years on the online side at the Hindustan Times, which is one of India's leading media publishers. I work with more than 300 journalists on a bunch of platforms that are focused on general news, business news, and niche audiences. Very excited to be here, and happy to answer questions if you guys have.
Thanks, Binoy. I'm ever one with questions, so I'm just going to dive in with questions for my panelists straight up. And the first question I really would love to sort of pick your brains about is, just about how publishers can effectively integrate new tools and technologies into their editorial workflows. There's always that trade-off. Every time you bring a new technology in, there's that trade-off in, the learning curve, how much time, how many resources you dedicate towards that new technology. Will it integrate successfully? And so there's always challenges around that. So I'd love to hear from you guys with like some of the examples of tech solutions that significantly enhance the efficiency of your editorial processes, and have in turn added value to your readers. So I really just would like to pick your brains on that subject. if I can invite, well, whoever wants to go first on this one, you know, whoever is eager to share their experiences, their thoughts, and their insights.
Yeah, Mili,
Yeah.
you wanted.
Sure. I guess I'll go for this. Also, mainly because this year has been interesting for us because we toyed a lot with AI tools. And we've always, because personally, I have enjoyed trying new tools and bringing more optimized ways of doing the same processes that we've been doing for many years and making it better. So this year was a time for us to try out different, all the AI buzz and figure out what it is all about. I think a few key things is, at a very mentality level, what we did for the team, and we're a much smaller editorial team, and unlike a legacy newsroom, we're not that many editorial people. It's a very agile type team. What we really did was, at a mindset level, build a learning segment. So we dedicated specific time every quarter, and that was a part of our KPI as well, for every reporter, journalist, editor in the team to dedicate time to learning and learning about new tools, new technologies that we could integrate. This would involve either all of us taking a course, or we would set aside a time once every for the team to get together, or just to talk about, so what are the new things that we're learning? What did we see other peers do? Are there any product improvements that we're hearing that people do from our interactions with PR and people in the industry, or the interviewees that we were meeting more often? What is it that they want? So this gives a chance to keep sort of tabs on what's going on in the industry and not become insular in what we were doing. And I think one of the results of this was, hey, we're hearing a lot about AI. So, you know, what should we do about it? Should we like kind of just watch where it's going, or should we pick up something and then jump in? And we decided this latter approach. So we jumped in with a few basic processes. Obviously, we all know AI is still evolving and still developing, and given the nature of things that we deal with, security, safety, privacy are all really big areas for us. And we can't just have ChatGPT or any other such tool write an article. We can still have them write some questions, which we edit. So we started integrating some of these tools for lighter processes, where not a lot of responsibility was involved. And by design, there was ability for us to verify, check, edit. So one, I think, and that was really successful and worked for us, was images. We did a lot of image resizing, and it's something, you know, journalists love to write. They don't want to do all the other things that a digital platform compels us to, like, I mean, put in the tags, put in the categories, yes. So we started doing this for image resizing first, and then image generation, as some of the tools got more sophisticated towards the later part of the year. And by now we knew that they were not chopping off fingers and you know, and those kind of things. So I think that really helped us make the platform look a little more appealing, since we deal with dry business news. Our images are never great, and we don't really even, apart from profiles, we don't really have interesting people pictures. So where we could take the opportunity, we were doing more cooler graphic, and some of the younger people in the team were more enthusiastic about trying these tools out. So we started using these tools for smaller, lighter processes. That was an easy, low-hanging fruit. The risk was lower. And I think that's a very good way to start. I wouldn't say we're already at a point where we're fully integrating AI in everything we do. Nope. And I think it's still very nascent to do so for any industry, especially ours. So I think doing it for a few small processes, we did it for interviewees. We do a lot of that for transcript, and I know a lot of other friends in the industry who use it for transcripting, again, because we know that there's an inbuilt layer where we can check all these things and we're not fully relying on them. It's sort of seeking support. And I think with that mindset, we want to keep pushing more for another year or so till we know that there are other tools that can help with more other functions. So I'll leave you with that and just more food for thought till we talk more about this.
Okay, thanks. Binoy, so the same question to you.
Yeah, so in the last 6 months, we've embraced a bunch of AI tools, and we use it in different parts of the newsroom. See, for the editorial, we use it with disclosures to generate two kinds of articles. One is a bunch of live blogs, which especially related to stocks, to the stock market. We were generating a bunch of affiliate articles as well, which we are having a serious rethink after the last Google update. We use AI tools for content moderation. We use it in our CMS, which we've It's called Blank Paper, which we built in-house. So we've sort of indexed it with a lot of AI tools to essentially help with our workflows. To give an example, to create summaries, to give you options about headlines, to tell our journalists that to check if what are the chances of this working, or of this article being truly useful, or even to assess what the competition is doing. So that's one. But we also provide the business team. My business colleagues have used AI to provide contextual ads. Now we are experimenting with AI for in our video processes. We'll be soon having a AI avatar for and anchors to read out something which let's say breaking news, or something which is let's say market bulletins, etc. So these are, so we continue to experiment. We are constantly reevaluating how we can use it and how we can improve efficiencies and be of as useful as possible to our audience. Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. I do have a question that has been sent through from the audience, and from a purely selfish perspective, I have one of my own, and it's all related to the AI space. And it's not to put you on the spot, it's a bit of one of those crystal ball moments of looking at the future. I think there's a general sense of AI is an evolving technology, and its uses have to be carefully monitored. What sort of do you guys have a system in place to to assess when an AI is ready for implementation, when it's ready for the main stage, as it were? What's your process around evaluations? And I suppose this actual question ties in with our audience question, which business functions are responsible for rolling out new workflows, and why have those divisions been ascribed, as it were? So again, what's your process around deciding that an AI function is ready for the main prime time, as it were, and who is responsible for rolling out that new workflow? I think for this question, I'll invite Binoy to speak on this first, and then I'll invite Mili afterwards.
Sure. So we've, I mean, as with any newsroom, we've got a bunch of functions. There are the product and technology, teams, and we've also who work closely with data scientists. So together, these are the teams that typically drive our AI, our adoption of AI tools in the newsroom. But we also, I mean, there's there's close collaboration with the editorial team, because ultimately we are a content company. So our objectives are pretty clear, right? How can we use it, but within the guardrails of journalism, and how can we use it? Because let's say for content creation, we've always limited it, 2 use cases, not more than that. Translation still has a long way to go, although there are huge opportunities there. So we're not really satisfied with the progress that we've made in translation. So we've been very selective about that. But as with what I just mentioned earlier, with workflows, how do we adopt these tools and make our lives easier? Because we are in the business of news. Digital journalism is relentless. There's some, and India being a vast country, and we being a national media brand, there is something happening yet almost every 5 minutes. How do we react for that? So we need to, no number of journalists is frankly enough to do justice to, that kind of news flow. So we use our philosophy is very simple. How can we, adopt our tools to make the lives of our journalists and the newsroom better for the sake of our audiences?
Thanks. Mili?
Yeah, I think also borrowing and segueing from that, we do let our needs guide it. And we don't go to like, oh, this is a tool I'm going to start using. We start with, these are the tools available, but these are our problems. Which of these tools match our problems? And then we'll just experiment a lot. So I remember even when we taking the image example, we just every quarter tried a new tool, analyzed the results over a period of time, and collected feedback within the team saying, oh yeah, I prefer this tool or not, and why, and what are the differences. And then by the end of the year, we knew that this X particular tool was working well for the kind of images we wanted to generate. Our audience was liking it. We also tracked how it affected the page views, or it impacted or changed it in any way. So I think we would let our need rule it, and then just a lot of experimentation. And in terms of time, there really is no specific moment where you'll know this is it, because there are just so many new tools that keep coming in each day. And, as so many more companies try out AI, and I've seen so many that come up just in this year. Some have integrated different functions into one dashboard, AI-driven CMSs, and for the likes of smaller newsrooms that don't have their own CMS, just kind of add layers of it, versus in Binoy's case, where they would actually develop some of these in-house. So I think a lot of these keep coming. So you can't really wait for the best moment and say, oh, this is the best tool which has everything, and then we're going to go for it. I would say just start small. Just pick any one that solves a particular problem for you, whether it's saving time on the journalist end, solve a daily use case, and just keep trying it out, and you'll hit the sweet spot for whatever that tool is. Because one tool works for a newsroom and the other doesn't. Even with transcription, I mean, even amongst my media friends, we don't really have one favorite. Everybody prefers a different one, because accents play a role, the region that you come from play a role, the kind of people you're speaking to play a role. So there are a lot of these nuances to it.
Okay, great. Interesting question. We have another question from the audience about AI, so I'm going to scroll straight into this. The question is, with AI aiding in democratizing researching of stories and generating content, more content will likely get commoditized. What are editorial teams doing to continue to differentiate their content from that of other publications? And I'll invite Mili to answer this first.
Thanks. I think this brings me to a very interesting point, and something that I fully haven't answered myself, but we've also seen a big growth in terms of, personal identities and voices of journalists, even if they are with certain newsrooms or bigger brands, with creator-led journalism and also independent journalists within newsrooms, whether it is, we saw this happening through the social media times, where a particular journalist was really big on Twitter because of the beat that they handle, or if they were doing a particular war reporting at that time. And I think that to some degree answers this, because a person's voice, their opinion and perspective is always going to be unique. And the AI is still not as sophisticated in recreating that, because what AI still lacks is context and background and understanding of a journalist covering an issue or a country or a region, or following a person for 20 years. And the AI is just incapable of replicating this experience, unless, of course, all this person's stories are taught to the AI and the machine has evolved and learned. Even then, it's not there yet in terms of thinking like this exact person. So I think starting to differentiate and allowing journalists in the newsrooms to grow their own voices. Byline is one way of doing it, and there's also, I mean, we've seen features and platforms where people can follow a particular author. Right? Like if you like somebody and you said, oh, I like Arthur Burke's articles, I'm going to follow him, so I get a notification every time he posts something. And I think if these kind of features where we start giving the journalists a little more power in terms of distribution. Also, but it does come with a caveat where you don't want them to supersede or override the overall brand. You also want to be wary of where this person's opinions are their own and where it is a part of the newsroom. And a lot of responsible journalists will, if they're doing this on their social profiles, they will say that this view is completely my own and not necessarily backed by the publication I work for. Because as an organization, you have a far greater responsibility of what you stand for or not, and especially when it comes to polarizing popular topics, political topics, etc. So I think that to some degree helps differentiate between what a machine has generated versus what a human has. And the other, and something that we also experiment with, is a lot of user-generated content, where instead of having the machine to really just write content, and they can do certain specific stuff, and Binoy presented some really nice examples of everyday things that don't require a lot of thinking. They're more easier reporting or just factual stuff based on numbers, or you feed it a report and it gives you a summary, sure. But wherever perspective and opinion is required, that's something that will still rest with humans, and the role of journalists and journalism will actually evolve more in that direction, in my opinion. So I think if you start seeing this distinction starting on, and look at AI more as a support structure versus something that will take over everything that we do. And I think that's the mindset shift that we as an industry and a world need, because everybody's scared. And, at some degree, and they're like, oh, is this going to replace what I do? And I don't think it's capable enough for doing that, and certainly not in our lifetimes. So how can we use it to support what we do, to make our lives easier, but help us develop our voice in a stronger fashion to put ourselves out there? I do hope that answers the question.
It was, I found it interesting, but I can only speak for myself. Binoy.
Yeah, so I think the question answered itself, right? It's every newsroom is going to generate content using AI. How do you differentiate yourself? How can you be truly useful to your audience, right? So nothing, nothing is going to replace what genuine reporting, right? What genuine research is going to do for your audiences. So that's been our view. I mean, that's been our stand constantly. Let's say for an example, there's a train accident, right? So AI is not going to really generate what really happened there. AI is not really going to tell you, the counts of the survivors or the victims, right? So it has to be, genuine reporting, producing original content. That was now, I mean, as long as, newsrooms continue, that's not really going to change things, right? So it all comes back to that. Okay, but with regard to, how can that reporting process be made more efficient, would be made more powerful using AI? That's something that, which newsrooms should embrace, as we're trying to do. So that clearly is the stand that we've adopted, and it's and the limitations of AI generated content, I think it's already it's there for everyone to see. People are, there are mistakes, and it generates mistakes, and people, and how audiences have been, reacting to that. That news is also, this kind of content is also pretty visible. So to have a serious rethink about how newsrooms should generate content using AI.
Okay, great. I do have a question. Okay, myself, it's just curiosity. Looking at just basically the history of publishing, you can actually see the changes that technology have imposed on publishers as they shifted from print to digital. But you can actually see the logistical changes. We've seen big publishers pulling back from international bureaus, leaning on news wires more, and we've seen news wires gaining more importance. Does that then, with AI becoming more proficient, it's, again, we've talked about it not being super proficient, and I think that's perhaps that the whole concept of you need a body to understand the world. You need a physical body to be able to interact and understand the world and understand the needs of your audience. But does that, with AI becoming more efficient, with news stories from around the world getting picked up by news wires, perhaps with bodies on the ground there, and AI being able to repackage that content, does that change? Will that change the fundamental nature of what it means to be a human journalist? Does it mean more investigative reporting? Does it mean more boots on the ground and actually going out there, seeing people, and less time behind your desk? Because all of the digital stuff, seeing press wires come in, press releases come in, all that gets picked up by your AI counterpart. Yeah, it's a small thought. We don't have much time, so if you want to answer it very briefly, I'll pass this to Binoy.
Yeah, I'll just quickly answer that. See, my understanding or my thoughts on this are that it's news. Unfortunately, people, how they how they react or embrace news is fast diminishing, right? That's been, it's something, it's a pattern that we see across newsrooms. So it's the, the waning attention of audiences, that's everyone knows about it. So how do newsrooms evolve there? It is so our stand has always been that we continue to do news because there is an audience. I mean, it'd be a diverse set of interests, but there will always be an audience that are interested in certain types of news. But to complement that, how do we create products, which is the NYT example is clear. I mean, it's clear that they have a bundled set of products that they obviously do. They have boots on ground. They generate news. They complement it with cooking and games and other stuff. So that for our how we see it is that okay, we continue to generate news, but how can we also be useful with a bunch of products? To give an example, education, right? Now there are how do we productize our education vertical to be useful to our audiences? For let's say exam aspirants. Or someone who is looking to study abroad, how do we, for example, creating, how do we make their lives in terms of application processes? So these are the things. So my short answer to this is that, news alone is going to cut it. It has to be complemented with a bunch of products, and there'll be audiences who would continue to be associated with the news that they're interested in and the products that they find truly useful.
Okay, great. Thank you, Binoy. Mili.
Yeah, I think I definitely agree with Binoy on the service aspect of product service with different things and resources that people would need that usually were not considered news earlier. I'm also seeing a lot of trend in moving towards more community thinking, and whether it's the entire group of subscribers or members, or just all the readers. And I see a lot of newsrooms facilitating that. So dialogue and discourses, sharing of opinions, exchanging, and also in a way educating the reader a lot more than just giving them an article or a video and saying, okay, this is content, then consume it. So I think this street is more than just two-way. It's becoming like a multi-channel, multi-way street where you cannot just talk back to the publisher or the journalist by commenting, but you could probably also talk to somebody else reading the article virtually. And a lot of technology is also facilitating this trend, which means that to Andrew's point, yes, I think somewhere it is moving beyond just regular press release kind of news content, because the technology is making that easier. So we can all consume this information, but where publishers and news platforms will now start seeing a difference is we're going to do more to engage these people. Earlier, we saw it as our role to just give them information, and then they could probably meet up in their own homes and discuss, oh, this political article that XYZ media wrote. But now we as the media are organizing this group and saying, do you want to talk about it? And what do you think about this or not? Again, we still stand as an objective facilitator where we're not taking sides, but we allow this discourse to happen across continents and across groups. And I think Zeitgeist in Germany is doing something really cool called the Country Talks, and they started this as an experimentation when Germany went to polls, but to just start helping the polarization in the community by getting people to talk to each other one-on-one. And they did a simple matchmaking chart, and I think NYT's done that in the more dating sense long ago, and every year they produce an article based on this. So very similar mechanism. They would put out a form, get people to fill it in, match people. I mean, an algo would match people, but people would have conversations and learn from each other. And ideally, they would put people who are politically opposing, just to start breaking the silos of us becoming and going into our own political groups and learn more about each other. So I think I do see news organizations play that role.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for your time today, guys. It was really fascinating. I learned a lot myself, and I'm sure our attendees did. I would like to thank you for your time. I'd like to thank the attendees who sent in their questions. I'd like to thank the attendees who didn't, but enjoyed listening to it. So yeah, thanks again. And yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody.
Thanks. Okay, it's my privilege to actually introduce our next speaker, Matt Lawson. He's the Publisher Success Manager at Ezoic. He will be discussing whether AI will come to replace plugins. Matt, if I can hand the floor to you so you can introduce yourself to our audience and also your topic, and then I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Andrew. So, as you just said, I'm Matt from Ezoic, and really today I wanted to chat a little bit more about what AI can really do in terms of applications for publishers moving forward, specifically publishers that are working maybe solo or in a small group, trying to come to terms with the industry that is constantly changing and how to potentially adapt parts of their site using AI-based tools to potentially counter new instances. For example, core web vitals, and how do we manage that? Helpful content updates. And if we can use AI-based tools to replace technologies that may be weighing down sites or costing publishers money. So that's in a nutshell what we'll be talking about today. Give me a second while I share my screen, and then we'll dive right in. Hopefully you should be able to see this now. There we go. Right. So you have already heard a little bit more about what I was talking about today, but the title of our talk is Will AI Lead to the Death of the Plugin? Now, to start us off, specifically for our participants here, I wanted to pose a question. How many WordPress plugins do you think are currently available to install? Pretty generic question, I know, for the industry, but I was surprised with the answer, if I'm going to be honest with you. We have A, 2,300, B, 12,500, C, 40,000, and D, 55,000. If you answered D, 55,000, you would indeed be correct. That is a significantly larger amount than even I realized, and really goes to show just how big plugins are a part of our industry. They've been a part of the industry for many, many years, and even though some people do see them as potentially outdated or becoming outdated now, there is definitely no signs of them slowing down in terms of their growth and the sheer amount currently available on the market. So really, we're going to be talking about if it's a good thing that there's so many plugins available, if these plugins are a good thing or a bad thing for site growth, and if there's any that we need to steer clear of when it comes to navigating the new challenges faced in the industry. So to introduce myself a little bit more, I'm Matt. I'm a Publisher Success Manager here at Ezoic, and I've worked here at Ezoic since 2019 in several areas, from sales to marketing to account management and even HR. So kind of been all around the shop and successfully implemented revenue growth and speed strategies personally for over 3,000 publishers so far. I also coordinate and deliver our Ezoic Pride DEI efforts, and currently I am focusing on ways for small and big businesses to beat Core Web Vitals and recover from the Google core updates. As we know, there have been a lot of those. You know, August, October, November, it has been quite the spree. So trying to help people to get back on their feet. Fun fact, I also own my very own Giraffe Facts website. So I thought I'd bring one today, which is, did you know that they rest their heads on their backs like kind of a pillow to go to sleep? They also only sleep for about 2 hours at a time, which I thought was really interesting. So there you go. Didn't think you'd get a giraffe fact today, but you've got one now. Now, back on topic, being a webmaster, I think this is a fairly safe assumption to make. It's tougher than most people believe. You know, you have all of these balls that you're constantly trying to juggle. And if you ask a layperson, they may say being a webmaster is just about creating articles as if you're posting on Facebook. But we know that is far from the case. We know that being a webmaster is about having a concrete content creation strategy, about responding to Google updates, about having an SSL, about having an SEO plan, making sure you have a proper caching setup, you have performance plugins, maybe you've got direct deals with different advertisers in your niche. There's many, many different balls to juggle, and specifically for solo webmasters, it's becoming more and more difficult to keep up to date with these several different elements at once. Now, that means that plugins can be incredibly useful. They've really emerged as this go-to solution, especially for people that aren't very technologically advanced in terms of how they're approaching their website setup. Maybe they don't feel comfortable with technology or they're not used to using it. It offers a user-friendly way to customize and extend the capabilities of your website. You know, drag and drop page builders allow people to create robust websites even without any extensive knowledge of code, and allows that website knowledge to be in the hands of people that previously did not have the means to access or create it. Also, additional functionalities like SEO optimization, integrating social media, enhanced security measures on your site can all be done in the drop of a hat through a plugin. And that's why they've become so much of a part of our industry, why they've become so ubiquitous with smaller webmasters. You know, plugins such as Yoast SEO or Akismet Anti-Spam, WooCommerce, Jetpack are household names at this point. And I have heard too many publishers to count at this point say that they'll Yoast something like it's a cool term. I don't think it'll ever catch on, but I definitely know what they mean when they say it. You know, if somebody has a SEO query, they want to find a keyword, they'll say, I'll Yoast it. If they need to improve the speed of a site, they might say, oh, I need to Jetpack that one. So they've become verbiage because they've been so synonymous with their core functionality. Now, this can be very useful, but the main drawback of a lot of these plugins, especially we've seen over time, more and more plugins that webmasters have used have come with a price point. They come with a additional software, additional premium, or a monthly subscription that can very, very quickly add up. Now, as we said before, there are over 55,000 WordPress plugins, and a lot of those can cost between about $15 to $35, but the average is about $20 to $30. Now, on a publisher using 15 plugins on their site, that would equate to over $5,000 spent annually just on plugins alone, before we think about a domain, a host, an SSL or email service that obviously need to take priority. So it can really cause smaller webmasters that are teetering on the edge of profitability to no longer be able to stay in this game because they're completely priced out by the very tools that they rely on to have a functioning site. And it might also not be a choice. These themes can be costly and can make it very, very difficult for people to switch out of, or you end up paying for a full year ahead and don't feel like you're able to quickly switch over to a new technology in order to save a quick buck. And you're forced into that cycle of using more premium technologies and paying those higher fees. Some people may want a safe site with, traffic protection from bots. And for that, they may need a more expensive host package. And we're seeing a big rise in all-in-one host providers really significantly increase their prices over time. That's compounding the problem that we're facing with these plugins and really facing a situation where we're getting it in the neck and a bit of a rock and a hard place, where publishers find all-in-one solutions too expensive. But if we're going for individual solutions with multiple different plugins, that can also add up over time. So it can become very difficult to know where to go. Now, on to AI, everyone's favorite topic at the minute. I thought I would ask ChatGPT this question, because who doesn't ask ChatGPT everything these days? And asked it, how can we streamline an online publishing business using AI? Now, it came back with many, many different answers, whether that's user engagement, SEO optimization, security monitoring, social media integration. There is a lot of different ways that we can use AI to potentially get rid of these pitfalls and actually make digital publishing as a whole more accessible to smaller publishers and small businesses. So specifically with content creation as an example, manually creating content can be very, very time consuming. You know, we have all experienced, if you've got a site of your own, going onto a page and thinking, oh, I know what I want to write about. And you've got a very clear frame of reference, and yet somehow you still spend hours brainstorming, planning, proofreading, rewording, just to get it right. And suddenly your entire day is gone. It can be a very, very arduous process. Now, that can become a lot easier if you hire a writer or two, but that can lead to additional expenses again, and can lead to you feeling like you've lost control of your content. Alternatively, you can use plugins like Yoast SEO or WP Robot, which can assist in that selection. Yoast SEO can help you with keywords, and WP Robot can assist in automatically creating articles for you. But unfortunately, you know what I'm about to say here, they also contain paid versions or premium packages, which means that you are either paying for writers or you're paying for automated content creation. Then we go to the page builders. Page builders like Thrive Architect or Elementor are fantastic for being able to enhance content aesthetics. They're drag and drop systems, allowing people that may not feel comfortable with typical website user interfaces to easily create articles, but they also introduce their own challenges, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. So if we do want to make use of AI, and we also don't want to end up paying an additional charge, we could use AI. We could use ChatGPT. This can revolutionize content creation because, as we know, manual workloads are something that AI is really, really great at being able to pick up the slack for us on. Tools like ChatGPT can assist in brainstorming and content creation, and can be really, really useful for just having that additional voice to bounce things off without having to pay anything. Now, they do have some limitations. For example, ChatGPT has quite a lot of limitations with its broad generative nature, which can mean that some of the content, especially in long form, can become quite diluted and lose its original focus. But it tends to still do what we want it to do, which is to have something to bounce off, and in order to help create that content. As an alternative to that, at Ezoic, we have our very own article generator called Wordsmith, which is allowing a free AI tool to actually focus on not just creating content, but creating articles, which is a big difference. With articles, you have headings, you have focuses, you have different styles that may lose that nuance in just generic content creation AI engines. So by using Wordsmith, you're able to sort those into separate sections and separate article subheadings in order to create an article that sounds much more closely to your own voice and your own sort of message that you want to be putting out there. So there are definitely ways to create content that don't break the bank and still allow you to free up that time to deal with those additional balls that you're having to juggle. Now, what about those page building tools? I know I mentioned them before, and I was dangling it on a little bit of a thread, so this is pretty important. What are they like? Are they okay to use? Should we be steering clear? Well, to answer that, we need to go back a little bit to Core Web Vitals, and I'm sure many of you are aware of Core Web Vitals. So just to give you a little bit of a frame of reference, if you're not, imagine you're waiting for a website to load slowly, like very, very slowly. You know, the menu isn't responding, the buttons don't look quite right. You go to look at a paragraph and then it goes up the page, and then you start reading it again and suddenly it shifts all the way down the page. You might have seen it if you're looking at a recipe blog, for example. It happens quite a lot. And whenever you do come across those, especially if you're just on mobile trying to find out a piece of information quickly, you tend to think, oh God, this is awful. I need to leave right now. I'm going to bounce. This isn't worth it. And that really is what Core Web Vitals influences. It's what they measure. Google really put this in place in order to improve the quality of websites and the experience of visitors across the net, and can be measured currently. There are changes coming into play in the future, but currently in 3 specific categories. LCP, or largest contentful paint, which marks the point at which the largest content element is visible. FID, which is the delay between the user's action and the browser response. And cumulative layout shift, which is the extent to which page elements shift around, such as when paragraphs move around when you first loaded into a page, as you may have experienced. Now, that may seem like it's a very far cry from what we were just discussing with AI and content creation, but it's really, really important when we think about how these plugins have an unintended influence in other elements of the industry. So passing Core Web Vitals can be incredibly important for webmasters, especially if they're using smaller businesses or they're lone webmasters that really rely on this website to take off. They really want it to grow and they're putting everything into seeing it succeed. Passing Core Web Vitals will do just that. It will improve search engine ranking and organic traffic, so it will improve visibility overall. However, failing Core Web Vitals, you can guess what this leads to. It harms a site's success. It reduces visibility and reduces search engine rankings, which often can lead to a significant reduction over time in organic traffic. So publishers are being forced to prioritize what can we do to pass Core Web Vitals at all costs. And often when they're looking through a fine-tooth comb or through a magnifying lens at their site, some of the biggest offenders in that are these page builders. They do enhance aesthetics, but often they do so using extra JavaScript and CSS code that's inserted into the page, using those drag and drop features or those more user-friendly user interfaces. And as a result, that additional code then becomes a problem for the visitors and can risk failure in the LCP portion of Core Web Vitals. If you fail that, you fail Core Web Vitals, and as a result, receive that penalty from Google. Now, some plugins like carousel plugins or contact form plugins like Contact Form 7 can also load that additional code that I mentioned before with the page builders, and we see similar impacts with Core Web Vitals long-term using those plugins. So it's not just about if a plugin is expensive or not, it's also about if this plugin is having an unintended side effect on other aspects of the site. So really, it's about a dilemma between, can I make my website aesthetic? Can I make it look as I want to? Or will I want to take that hit with the reduced organic traffic? You know, do I really want that for the site? So it's prompted a lot of publishers to focus on a simpler setup and potentially removing plugins for that reason. Now, moving forward into ad implementation, most publishers, most businesses really need a form of steady income in order to keep the lights on and the doors open. And that is no different for smaller webmasters. Monetization can seem very, very overwhelming. You know, when you are already balancing making 5 articles a week and also updating your content strategy and your brand and taking new pictures, do you also really have time to get on your email and message several different brands to negotiate the best prices for next month? It's incredibly difficult to do that. And so monetization plugins offer that balance. They offer a way for you to just plug it in and easily earn, which can be very helpful. Unfortunately, over time, we've started to see that a lot of these monetization plugins that are the easiest to access also end up being the ones that are not forced to stick to Google's guidelines, which later down the line can result in unregulated ad quality, in high ad density, in content that's used to mine accidental clicks, and even can send visitors to malicious content such as malware, which is not what you want to do when building up a loyal visitor base. So there can be some real significant risks involved with running these plugins. Ultimately, we know that Google is not easy when it comes to having site integrity on the platform, especially with content like Google Ad Manager. If you get hit by Google on that platform, it's very unlikely that they take that violation or that strike off of you. Usually that's on there for good. So it can make it a very, very risky procedure to use some of these technologies in the modern day. So if we can't use plugins, what else can we do? Now, the problem is that plugins can be unsafe but they also can be stale. They can be static, and as a result, they cannot adapt to different visitors. So they may show too many ads for some of your visitors, and for others that are more ad tolerant, they may not show quite enough ads. So you may be leaving some of that money on the table, as well as increasing your bounce rate. So it's difficult to find that balance when you have that static setup. Also, implementing ads through a plugin, you guessed it, requires additional code because it's additional technology, which can further worsen core vital issues. So we're really seeing that snowball effect of static ad placements plus unofficial ad types plus that additional code. One alternative to this could be using direct ad orders, having your webmaster or having your operative within your business go out and directly negotiate with advertisers on your behalf, which could be great. It could mean that you have content that directly fits your niche, and in most cases can also lead to non-competitive CPMs. Advertisers often produce offers that are significantly lower than those that they would be required to if they were in a Google Ad Manager auction house, because they no longer have to compete with other people. So this can be a useful option, but does mean webmasters will tend to lose out, even if slightly, longer term compared to a more competitive programmatic solution. Now, you don't have to use a static setup, and really what we're seeing going forward into the end of 2023 and beyond is that publishers seem to be having much more success using an adaptive setup and really utilizing artificial intelligence, because we can use AI to have each session on Ezoic be customized to the individual's preference, whether that is the number of ads shown, the sizes of ads, as you can see in this little GIF here, that really, really differs depending on where you are in the world, what your signal type is, what your preferences are, and that can have a huge impact on take-home pay. Some people may bounce if they see a top-of-page ad. Some people may be absolutely fine with it. Some people may be fine with a sidebar ad, and others may find that really, really reprehensible and just can't deal with that, and they'll bounce straight away. It's interesting to see what will make some people have a difficult time with the page view, but it's very different for very different people. So having the same setup is bound to leave money on the floor. Being able to have an adaptive setup means that you can show less ads and use that artificial intelligence to more successfully implement the ads that you are showing. So you don't need to be concerned with striking that balance manually, and you can spend more time focusing on content. This is a really, really helpful solution when you're trying to balance the direct ad orders versus the plugin, because before it was only ever either speed, get this up and running right now, but run a risk with the quality, or take a long time building that negotiation, building that relationship, and still leave some money on the floor. So now with AI, we can actually do both, and we can ensure that webmasters have those additional advertisers in the ecosystem bidding, but it's alongside the auction house. They're no longer able to just slip by and hope that they don't notice. They have to bid alongside the other advertisers in the pool. And so we always make sure that they get the very best bids. And that is thanks to AI. Now, can it replace every plugin? I would say that AI is definitely starting to give plugins a run for their money. Now, we know that AI has automated repetitive tasks down. It is fantastic at them and has rendered several plugins obsolete because of that. For example, some social media plugins are obsolete because of AI-powered social scheduling tools like Buffer and Hootsuite that can complement what your current strategy is through AI and through deciding what is best specifically for your business and not just generally for everybody. Additionally, AI-driven SEO tools have a significant advantage over the generic SEO tools in that you're no longer needing to mine that data yourself to find what's relevant to your own content. You actually have the content right there at your fingertips. Tools like Surfer SEO or Ezoic's very own topic suggestions allows you to see what is easy to rank for and what has a high search volume right away without you having to download a SEMrush table, go and put it into Excel and do a whole bunch of work to it to actually make it work for you. So AI is really taking some of the work out of these tools. However, AI can't do everything quite yet. There are still some elements that we would say AI is lagging behind a little bit on, or needs a little human touch. Firewalls or anti-bot systems will always need a human there to provide that final say in whether somebody is good or not good for the platform. Additionally, some plugins like performance optimization plugins can have an AI assistant to say which may be needed on a site, but it cannot provide the exact performance optimization itself. Now, as a result, we really need to start focusing away from just performance and more towards AI that can allow you to see all these plugins on the site and which ones are really causing these slowdowns, causing these problems to stack up financially and with Core Web Vitals. Traditional plugins can introduce that complexity and potential conflict as well with each other, which can really cause problems when you're actually trying to speed up a site and you end up slowing it down because 3 or 4 different CSS filters have ended up coming into play at the same time. We do have Leap, which is recommended by Google and is a lightweight alternative. Now, it does use traditional performance enhancements and additional enhancements on top of that to provide a comprehensive speed solution. But I think the really, really cool thing about this new technology coming into the forefront for publishers to use is that we're able to identify unnecessary code and unnecessary plugins so publishers can make that decision. You may not always want to remove every single plugin on the site. Some of them still have their purpose. Some of them can't quite be replaced by AI yet. But at least you know the impact they're having and you can make that informed decision going forward on what is best for the site and what is best going forward for the business. That's all I have to say here. So I'm happy to hand it on over back and we can take some questions.
Thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate your demonstration. It sounds like, I guess the consensus is like AI is making a good run for the money for plugins, and there's still a lot that can be done from that point. We've got one quick question, just because we're almost out of time. The question is, my understanding is that LLMs work best when trained on specific data sets. Is there the possibility that plugin developers can launch their own solutions, be better at niche tasks than generalist AI, leading us back to the plugin problem? I guess I wanted to add on top of that to contextualize that a little bit more, besides what he said in terms of also creating plugins with AI. Do you think that then that could become more mass produced? And I guess you could tie that back to Ezoic's experience, right? Because you guys have created solutions for your customers based on that. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I definitely say that it's a real balance when it comes to how you can create experiences with AI for different types of site, different types of business. We've seen some sites, for example, if they're focused on specifically on mostly affiliate revenue, or if they have a different revenue stream, if they have mostly e-commerce, where sometimes they really focus on heavily niche plugins that can complement those specific industries, whether that is WooCommerce for e-commerce, for example. I think that the benefit really of using something like AI when it comes to handling and monetization is that AI can work out which page views are most likely to have the behavior of a customer that's going to engage in, for example, affiliate marketing and is going to purchase through an Amazon link, and can reduce the ads for visitors most likely to engage in that behavior so that you can maximize the click-through on those different ads. So you can have different income streams at the same time and still make the most out of each and every one of them, because AI is allowing you to work out which people would be more likely to engage in those behavior profiles.
And then they could be, you can continue to keep them compatible with WordPress and other platforms as well, like based on your experience with Ezoic. Is that something that people who create their own individual tasks can consistently do, or is that something that you need additional help with?
I definitely think that it's going to be continually up to date with WordPress and compatible with WordPress for the foreseeable future. I think any sort of AI tool that locked itself out of WordPress would be losing a significant portion of the industry. And we're not at a point yet where that would be really possible or financially feasible for a new AI tool to really go for. So I think anything that really is looking to integrate with sites has to keep in mind WordPress functionality. And even here at Ezoic, when we use AI constantly and we talk about plugins and the potential side effects, we have our own plugin that we coordinate with. So it's really about having the different options so that even in a very, very niche specific setup, there's always a way that a publisher can still use artificial intelligence.
Makes sense. With that, Matt, thank you so much for taking the time to present this today with us, and thank you for our partners as well for joining us with this event. Thank you so much, Matt.
No worries.
I'll pass it over to our next presentation. So Amy was originally going to join us, but her colleague Max Cooper, the head of audience and head of audience development from Nine, which has a multiple range of mass titles, whether it's Brisbane Times, SMH, WA Today. It's a national publisher in Australia. She's going to be going through the subject on newsletter and audience development through newsletter. So just a bit of a synopsis. This year particularly, newsletters has become revitalized, particularly as we're shifting towards the depreciation of third-party cookies, and just, you know, as many of the panelists and the contributors have emphasized around really building communities and emphasizing more on brand building. So with particularly Nine, the conversations that we've had, like they've sort of had to restart again at a more, there's going to be lessons here that you can learn in terms of how to do certain strategies, and also their journey on how they had to go through and reinvent that process internally. So I'll pass it over to Max. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So yes, my name is Max Cooper. I'm head of audience development for Nine's Metro Publishing Masters, which include the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, which are our biggest newspapers and websites. I was previously, however, our newsletter editor, so I'm well versed to speak about our transformation for newsletters. So if you just bear with me, I'll just share my screen. Thank you. So yes, so if you go to the next slide there. We're part of the audience development team, and the audience development team, we're really the voice of the audience in every room in our business. So we look at, in particular, what is engaging our audiences, what is driving them to subscribe, what are their habits, and how are their habits changing. We're also very much the linchpin, the bridge in and out of our editorial newsroom. So we deal a lot as the sort of conduit between our product team and editorial, and our commercial sales team and editorial, and also our subscription and marketing team, who we work very closely with. In terms of our role, we feel very strongly that a lot of our role is understanding what's important to our readers, as well as what's important to our journalists and newsrooms, and to distinguish with it if it's important, that it's our job to make it interesting. So a lot of our role is feeding back audience data and behaviour to our editorial newsrooms. But we do understand very strongly that journalism can't be defined just by numbers and data alone. However, we do know that if we believe a story is important to tell, that it's our job to make it interesting so that people will engage with it. So the next slide, thank you. Our mastheads in particular in Australia are very much known for our quality journalism, our investigations and our public service journalism, as well as a really broad sweep of content ranging from food to travel, lifestyle and culture. We're particularly known for journalism that has a strong impact on people's lives and our society as well. And to do that, we need to find a meaningful audience. And by meaningful, we mean one that we have a relationship with, that is not like someone paying us a one-off visit to read one story. It's much more of a deeper relationship than that. And to have those kind of relationships, we really need to stay connected to our audiences, which in a time of digital media, when media has become fragmented and there's sort of endless sources of information, that has become harder and harder. And in order to see growth, we know that we have to really become an essential part of people's lives. We have to be something that they interact with daily, not just like once in a blue moon. We're very much a subscription-based business, so people need to have a value for their subscription. So we really need to be an essential daily habit for those. And for all of those objectives, newsletters really help us to achieve all those things, to stay connected to our communities, to build really meaningful relationships with them, and to become an essential part of their everyday. So newsletters, why you should look at newsletters and why publishers are increasingly focusing on newsletters is because they really offer a myriad of opportunities to connect with readers directly without giving up control to third-party platforms and channels. It's very much a relationship between you and your audiences. So we know, for instance, that readers who sign up to New York Times newsletters are twice as likely to become subscribers. The UK's The Times and the Sunday Times also report that subscribers who engage with their daily newsletter are 49% less likely to churn, so 49% less likely to cancel their subscription. And we've also done analysis on our newsletters, and we know that it's an incredibly important retention tool for our subscribers. So if we can get subscribers signed up to newsletters, they are much, much more likely to stay subscribers than if they don't. We also have editorial control. So we control the newsletters and readers get to decide when they read them. So those decisions aren't left up to big social media platforms or search platforms. When someone sees something and what they see isn't decided by an algorithm, it's decided by the relationship we've built with that reader. So when platforms like Facebook stop prioritizing news, we've been okay because all of our focus is really on driving direct engagement with our products. So whether that's them coming direct to our homepage to read our stories on our homepage, or to read them in the app, or very much so with our newsletters, it gives us a lot more control over our own destiny and on the way that our own journalism is consumed. They're also really curated newsletters. So it can combat news fatigue. We know post-COVID, there is a real sense of people being overwhelmed by the news, particularly the horrendous conflict that's going on at the moment. Newsletters are a way to sort of have a curated experience of news without it being an overwhelming feed of news that you're faced with. You can also really target readers with content that they are interested in and passionate about without them having to search around to try and find it. So emails are old. I'm sure everyone probably remembers their old email account. I'm embarrassed to say I still have a Hotmail account that I had probably back in the year 2000. It's so old that its death has been predicted a number of times, but it keeps surviving. Often with the new sort of message services like Slack and so on, when they were first around, people predicted that emails were going to die a death, but no, anyone who works for a company, I'm sure, is familiar that you still get many emails every single day. And while emails are old, so are we. So we come from a really strong legacy print background, but we're now very much a digitally focused media company. But our flagship masthead, the Sydney Morning Herald, is 192 years old, and our Melbourne-based masthead, The Age, will turn 170 years old next year. Some of our newsletters were also very old. So I became a newsletter editor in 2020. And when I first started looking at some of our newsletters, they were decades old. we didn't actually have any idea with some of them how people had even gotten on those newsletter lists. They weren't being monitored. People didn't sort of know the open rates or any of the kind of metrics around them. Essentially, there was people in the newsroom whose job it was to kind of put a list together very quickly, and it was like a box they ticked as part of their job, but no one really put any care or love into curating them or working out the best content for them. At that stage, we had 14 newsletters, and when I did look at the average open rate, it was about 25%, some were as low as 15%, and now that average is 49%, and it can be as high as 84% for some of our newsletters. So in terms of how we got there and what we did, we wanted to make our newsletters easy to build, easy to find, and easy to measure. So the first thing that we did was we did an audit of our existing newsletters, and we decided whether we should relaunch them, sort of rebrand them, give them a refresh, whether we should actually just kill them off. And at that stage, we were actually still promoting newsletters on our newsletter sign-up page that we hadn't been sending for a number of years, whether to launch new newsletters, and then finally how we would go about promoting them. So the first thing that we looked at was how to make that easy. And the first part of doing that was making newsletters easy to build. So when we first started really focusing and putting love into our newsletter offering, they were built in a number of different systems. They were quite clunky to build. Certainly any that had any kind of narrative introduction or so on were very time consuming to build. You had to sort of upload lots of different photos and cut them in different ways. Then there were other ones that were very simple and sort of unappealing newsletters that were just lists that people would drop and drag into, but no one really kind of had any connection to them. And they were very much removed from all the other systems where we did our journalism. So our product team worked really hard to put our newsletters into our CMS, which is called Ink, which is a bespoke version of WordPress. And our newsletters are now all built within our CMS. They have specific templates, and they're very, very easy to build. Each newsletter has its own template, but you can, those templates are very flexible. You can add images, you can edit copy, you can make them as long or short as you want, and you can very easily drop in content from within our CMS. And it's in the same place that we do all of our other work. Our next step was to make our newsletters easy to find. Again, when we first started looking at our newsletters, they were buried on a sort of page off our homepage. You couldn't see them anywhere on our homepage. It was very difficult to find out that they even existed or where you would sign up to them. So one of the first things that we did was we rebuilt our newsletter page so that it looked engaging. Before we relaunched our newsletter page, all of the artwork promoting the newsletters was very generic stock images, very dull colors, didn't really speak to what the newsletter was, and very uninviting. So we got one of our editorial artists to redesign all of the tiles for our newsletters. We gave them all a specific sort of look and theme, so you can see that they all have a similar stylistic look there. We also started promoting them on our homepage. We have a strap at the top of our homepage that we call the CTA strap, which is a call to action strap. And we started to promote the different newsletters in there so that the readers were aware of them, and we rotate those each day so that people get an idea of the different newsletters available. We also got all of our editorial workers to start putting sign-ups to newsletters in the bottom of every story. So in every single one of our articles, you will find a tagline at the bottom of it that encourages them to sign up to a newsletter. We also had QR codes in the wake of COVID. QR codes obviously started to become used quite a lot. So we have them in print ads, and even when we go out to events and things like that, we have QR codes that people are very able to kind of quickly scan, and they can sign up to the newsletters. So that was another easy way for people to find them. We then wanted to make them easy to measure. as I previously said, people weren't really looking at the metrics of our newsletters. And with all journalism, obviously as being part of our audience development team, we know that being able to feedback audience data to our newsrooms is really important to be able to see what's working and what's not and why that might be happening. So we had specific dashboards built for our newsletters. We have one that really focuses on the performance of each newsletter send, and we have another one that really tracks the journey of a newsletter sign up. So we have a number of different metrics that we now measure. They're really comprehensive newsletters, newsletter dashboards. They have heat maps and graphs. They track not just the traditional kind of metrics that people think about, like open rate, send count, click to open rate, also things like how recently someone's opened a newsletter, how frequently they open a newsletter, what kind of audience overlap there is between newsletters, what sort of a journey they have on our website after they click into our content from a newsletter. So you get a really comprehensive view of the audience for our newsletters. The next thing that we wanted to do, so once we did that, we then went through that process. We do that constantly now on repeat. So we are constantly auditing our newsletters. We sort of haven't just launched them, promoted them, and let them sit. Sometimes we decide that a newsletter really isn't working. We're not afraid to sort of kill off ones that might have been working at one stage but aren't anymore. It was particularly difficult when we had a coronavirus newsletter daily throughout COVID that was incredibly well loved, and readers sent us amazing feedback about how much it meant to them in their lives during that sort of struggling period. But at some stage we had to say that newsletter had served its purpose and we stopped it. We also had another newsletter that we launched for our culture team that just never really worked in the way that we wanted it to. So we had to make the decision to stop doing that so that we could use those resources to push it into something else. So we're constantly looking at the feedback for different newsletters and deciding what the next step for those newsletters will be. Our newsletters also serve different purposes. So we have a number of newsletters now that are subscriber only, and we're increasingly launching more subscriber only newsletters. We know they play such an incredible part in retention, and it's a great benefit for our subscriber and marketing team to be able to promote certain newsletters as subscriber only. The way that we've chosen whether they're subscription only is to really look at what value they're giving to readers. And also we have really targeted particular journalists who we know through our reader research and our audience data are really beloved by our subscribers. So Ross Gittins, as an example, has been with our Sydney Morning Herald for 45 years. He's an incredibly loved and respected economics correspondent, and his subscriber-only newsletter has been amazingly popular. So we're really looking at these newsletters to add value to subscriptions. Other newsletters, however, we are using to try and attract new readers, in particular younger and female readers. So we have one that's Greater Good that is really offering people, and this was launched during COVID, but it's continued to get really strong reader feedback. So it offers people a chance to escape that sort of grim news cycle when they're looking for something that's like a different kind of journalism. And we get some amazing individual feedback from readers who really appreciate being able to have that sort of stories presented to them that sometimes they might miss if they're just looking on our homepages. Our Live Well newsletter is a lifestyle newsletter around how to sort of, fitness, nutrition, lifestyle tips, that sort of thing. And it's really aimed at a younger female readership. Real Money offers practical money advice, and that's been really great at scooping up some new audience for us. And Wealth Generation is one for our one of our sister mastheads, the Australian Financial Review, that is really aimed at looking at aspirational investors. So we do use newsletters to target different audiences, and we treat them differently and promote them differently depending on what the purpose of that newsletter is. We also use our newsletters to really provide context and, again, to battle that sense of news fatigue. This is particularly important when publishers are trying to figure out how to attract younger readers. We've done a lot of market research with younger readers that tell us that quite often if they're reading something, there's a sense of assumed knowledge about a topic. We really try hard in our newsletters to provide context, and you can do that quite quickly with a sort of how we got here, some links to previous stories that we've done, that sort of thing. So that's been really appreciated by readers. It also is a summary where you can get across a day's news, or you can get across a topic's issues and that sort of thing really quickly without having to scan through lots and lots of content. Our morning edition is incredibly popular, and really if you only have sort of a certain amount of time every day, you could read the morning edition and be really well briefed across the day's most important stories. We also have newsletters that we've particularly aimed at sort of more niche communities. So the great thing about newsletters is that you are able to serve up content that people are particularly passionate about to that particular audience. Two really strong examples have been Examine, which is our science newsletter, which when we did some research with readers, we asked them we gave them some options, and we were surprised to see that they were incredibly interested in science. Our science senior journalist was also incredibly excited, and he has been fantastic at writing a really personable narrative newsletter about science, and it's incredibly popular. It's the kind of thing that might not have got as much homepage prominence in the past, but now it does, and we've been able to really establish a great community with those science readers. Another one is Booklist. We do a huge amount of book reviews and book content, but it's a difficult thing to put a book review at the top of our homepage, and it certainly wouldn't stay there for very long. And for people who are really interested in that content, it was often hard for them to find it. The Booklist is one of our strongest newsletter performers. It has an incredibly high open rate and a really strong list. And people really love it because they get all their content in one place, and it's written by our literary editor, who's a very well-respected expert on books. So it's just a couple of ways where you can really target particular audiences with stuff that they're passionate about. Newsletters have also been able to really drive engagement on site. So at a time when we have seen these charts are for the Australian Financial Review. And what you can see there is that top chart is showing the different session referrers for AFR subscribers. The yellow line, by far the most prominent, is direct, so they come direct to us. But when you take out direct, that bottom chart shows you the different referrers there. And you can see throughout 2023 that newsletters have now actually overtaken search as the referrer for subscribers to AFR's content. For the metros, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age, we've very much seen that newsletters are much more dominant in terms of referring our subscribers to us than, for instance, social. And our social session referrers are on a decline continually, as particularly Facebook has sort of turned away from promoting news articles. So newsletters have really stepped into that and are a great source for driving people back to our content. All this change and growth in newsletters wouldn't have been able to be accomplished without a transformation first within our newsrooms around what newsletters were and the importance of them. So when we first started looking at them, like I said before, people really thought that they were just a kind of tick box they had to do at the end of their shift. No one really cared much about them. No one wrote them as a sense. It was just a list of stories. We had to really show why they were important. And we've been able to do that with we did a lot of work when someone started a newsletter, feeding them back the audience data, but also the audience feedback that people write in, which is by far the nicest feedback I think we get across any of our other distribution platforms. So being able to feed that back to journalists and show them just how important it was, and they could see the data and how quickly the lists grew and how much people were engaging with that content. And then we were able to spread that message across the newsroom to the point now that the most senior people in our newsrooms write newsletters, and particularly subscriber-only newsletters, because they are seen as such valuable pieces of content for our journalists. And we're now sort of actually, constantly being asked, can I write a newsletter rather than having to beg people to write a newsletter. So it has involved a cultural change within the newsrooms. So when we are being asked, can I write a newsletter? Because it can be a bit of a sort of knee-jerk reaction to sort of something that someone wants to do, or if they just want to get their story out there. But there are lots of questions that we like to ask before we launch a newsletter. Primarily, we want to know who it's for. So you need to be able to define who the audience is for this newsletter. Does it meet a specific audience need? For example, one of our newsletters, What's for Dinner, is literally giving people one recipe every day about an easy recipe they can cook for dinner that night. It's a sort of service that we're providing to a reader. Is it meeting readers' interests, what they're actually looking for, rather than what suits our newsroom structure? It's really about meeting the audience need. And is it good for the brand? Is it something that our brands care about and what we want to be seen to care about? How do we know that we're targeting the right newsletter? So what data do we have to justify the decision to launch a newsletter? What reader feedback do we have? What reader market research do we have? And also what the experience is of other mastheads. So we're often looking at other publishers to see what newsletters they're offering, and also which ones they start and which ones they stop, because it can give you a clue about what might have worked and what might not have worked. Resourcing is incredibly popular. No newsroom has endless amounts of resources, so you need to decide upfront who is going to write it, who is going to produce it, how much new content is needed for that newsletter as opposed to repackaging existing content, who will also edit it to make sure it's there, and to make sure that there's a commitment that they're not going to be interested in doing this for a couple of weeks and then say, oh, I can't do it this week. Because once you have a newsletter, you really need to establish that habit with readers. We also ask questions around what form it should take. So if it's narrative or list, the length, the sections, and so on. So there's lots of questions we need to ask before we launch a new newsletter. That's about it from me, but I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Max. That was very insightful on the journey. Some questions that I have is, so do individual contributors, are they also critiqued or measured by, because you've come in that background first as well, are there certain metrics that they are given to determine to contribute to the success of the newsletter or not?
In terms of the people who write them?
Yep.
So anyone can access our dashboard, and then we measure each individual newsletter. So we regularly feed back to our journalists, this is how many open rates this one got, and sometimes it might be that particularly we look at the subject line, maybe this kind of theme that you've written on before works really well, this one doesn't. As an example, we once did for our watch list, which is really about what you can stream on smart TVs. We did a special once on sort of where we broke up everything for the whole month that you could stream rather than just doing it weekly. And it was really, really well read. So we started doing that every single month. So now we do a monthly special of that particular newsletter. So we look at that feedback all the time, and we feed it back to the journalists and try and repeat what has worked and try and avoid what might not have worked so much.
Thank you. One quick question, because we're almost out of time. Dushant writes, are you able to assign a monetary value to a newsletter user? If so, can you share a range?
Oh, I'm afraid I can't. And it's a good question because they're valuable in different ways. So for instance, we very much see most of our value for subscriptions being newsletters being about retention, so retaining those existing subscribers, but I can't give you a monetary value on it. But having said that, we are also getting commercial value out of them because we have certain advertisers who really want those targeted audiences. So for example, one of our business newsletters from the start of next year will have a certain section that is sponsored by a particular advertiser because they want to get everyone who reads that newsletter. So we've been able to get monetary value out of selling ads in them or out of getting the subscription value. So I don't have a specific figure for you, but I can tell you that there's a number of ways you can get monetary value out of newsletters.
Thank you. Just one more quick one. The screenshot that you showed with the metrics, was that measuring tool custom built? Was that from WordPress, or are you using a third-party tool?
It was custom built by our data team. So they've built two different dashboards for us that, yeah, they're great. They're very effective. I'd be happy to share too. We did a sort of an INMA blog post on those dashboards as well, which has got a bit more information about them. So if that's of use to anyone, I'm happy to share that around as well.
That'd be great if you can share it to us, and we'll share it to all the registrants, attendees today, and yeah, I'm sure they'll get great value from it.
Sure, no problems.
Awesome. So Max, thank you so much for stepping in for Amy and for your presentation as well. It was very helpful and valuable. So thank you for your time, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
That's awesome. Bye. And so we come to our last but not least. I think I'm going to get my geek on a little bit as well, because I'm obviously an SEO first amongst many things. So the final topic for our presentation is how to align your editorial strategy. How to align your editorial strategy with a better search generative experience. Today we're going to be doing this in a Q&A format. And the way that we sort of, just to give again a synopsis, we've got two sides of the argument, one positive, one negative. Obviously, there's been a bit of discussion about how many of our publishers are having concerns for search, particularly because it's been the most dramatically impacted. On one hand, we've got have Keith Newby. He's the head of audience growth from News Corp Australia. On the other hand, we have Nikki Chowdhury, who's it's the SEO lead and AI. Sorry, maybe I'll leave you two guys to allow yourselves to. Sorry, I'll pass it to you both to first give a bit of an introduction and sort of the sides that we're going to speak about today. Maybe I'll pass it over to Nikki to start off with.
Thanks. That was a pretty good introduction, actually. So I'm Nikki. I lead audience for Vogue Australia. I oversee our SEO strategy, AI implementation in our workflow and potentially on the website very soon, and also our shopping content, which involves reviews and affiliates.
Hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. So I'm Keith Newby. So I work in the technology, data and digital department of News Corp, and I'm responsible for audience growth, which is largely and primarily SEO focused, so technical SEO and strategic SEO.
Well, thank you. So Keith, we'll start with you with a few of the questions, because when we had our chat prior to the call, I guess there was more concern rather than optimism towards search generative experience, particularly because news is more of a lead indicator for that, and your focus is more on news. So I guess what has News Corp, or what have you sort of looked at in terms of mitigations to understand the impact of that for top stories, and how does that compare to your maybe your global counterparts? Have you spoken to them? Have they given you any sort of indication of feedback?
Yeah, well, there probably couldn't be a bigger issue in SEO in terms of setting a 2 or 3 year strategy. Ever since Bard came through and Google responded, perhaps somewhat hastily to the idea that they might lose market share, we've been looking at the search generative experience. I mean, we're limited, obviously, by not being able to have access to labs in our territory. Even with the expansion to 120 countries, still Australia can't have a look at it. So we're quite reliant on the analysis that's coming through from our US counterparts. And yet, I mean, to your sort of framing of the positive and the negative, as we sort of talked about the other day, in some senses, you can think of it as a massively expanded featured snippet. And featured snippets can offer some real benefits in, brand awareness and visibility, and building up a sense of authority around a topic, not so much in Google's algorithm, but in the audience that's searching. But, we work mostly with brands that already have a lot of visibility, and really we're very traffic sensitive economically. So in that sense, it's hard not to see it as probably a net negative for the publishing industry, certainly the publishing industry that's working at the sort of scale we are, that's not going to get so much value just from visibility and is looking for the referral. And to sort of start with where we're looking at how we mitigate, first, we've got to size what the impact is. And really there we're focusing mostly on, we're seeing very, very different behavior. I mean, I don't know how familiar people are with the SGE experience, but there's sort of 3 stages. There's no SGE, here's a fairly standard SERP layout, but would you like SGE? And then there's the SGE presented front and center. And incidentally, we're just seeing patents come through from Google where they're talking about personalizing those SGE front and center experiences based on the level of familiarity people have with the subject matter that they queried against. So it's going to be quite hard to determine exactly what that content is at scale. Now, the way we tend to look at it is it's really query intent based. So we're seeing a huge amount of variability between taking a basket of keywords where we might say there's news intent queries versus, let's say, shopping or e-commerce research, real estate research, up top funnel, middle funnel, down funnel. They're all offering varying ratios of how prominent the SGE experience is going to be. And what we're seeing so far is that news is, shall we say, fairly cautious. And I think Google is, after having rushed the labs into market, is probably taking a fairly cautious approach for a number of reasons, and is not necessarily in a rush to get to a full commercialized product out there in the market, and in news even more so. So I won't go to the exact numbers, but we're talking about, in the early stage of the trial, it seems to be shifting, single figure percentages against a basket of news intent keywords for an automated default SGE presentation. But the concern or the challenge is that, when you talk about, well, how often do they say that they can generate an SGE experience, it's up closer to 70, 80%. This is a huge latitude there between the sort of impacts we might see when they finally decide on their rollout. And it's also going to be a case of really tracking user behavior. And look, the data, we hope that when Google does go into market, they're also going to give us a sufficient set of analytics for us to really understand what the audience behavior and performance is. But that optional presentation of SGE is going to make a big impact, I'd say, on the final change in our traditional click curve and rankings, and top stories click-through rates, and to see where we eventually land in terms of traffic. So that's sort of, there's a lot more in there, but in terms of taking the negative view, I mean, personally, I find it hard to not see it as anything other than a challenge.
Absolutely. And so let me bring briefly Nikki into this as well, and let's tie this again together, because typically sometimes SEOs would see feature snippets with 0-click searches and so forth. So maybe Nikki, could you start off with your perspective on, because you said you mentioned that you work more on the e-com and evergreen side, maybe how you see that brands and maybe the titles that you're working on can work around that, and Keith, I'll come back to you on that afterwards. So yeah.
Well, I guess I'll first speak to what the Google experience is like for most people now. I wouldn't say that it's a great experience. You go onto a SERP, you see a bunch of ads at the top, then you see a bunch of blue links, you have to click through, and most of them have, another set of referral links. So there's a lot of ad experience on the SERP page. And I think for the next generation of users, that's just not what they're looking for. And even though it's been the interface to brands for the last decade, the main interface to finding brands and websites, we are seeing that change. So I think in 2021, I mentioned with our talk previously that the VP of product at Google said that 40% of Gen Z start their search on TikTok and Instagram. So there is this demand for search content. Even though TikTok doesn't brand itself as a search engine, it's being used as such. There is a demand for content and a search platform that is visually engaging, real-time, and includes a viral and user responsive kind of side to the content instead of just having a bunch of blue links. So obviously search generative, it is going to change the amount of traffic that we get to our websites. But I think the bigger question here is, if less people are searching in that way, those audiences are going somewhere. And I think it's important for brands to be very agile in how they think about their search content. So we are less to do with news. We do a lot more evergreen at Vogue. I also oversee the SEO for GQ as well. So for us, evergreen content and being authorities on a specific niche is kind of what the brand legacy is all about. And I do think for brands that really have a specific niche, this could be a really big opportunity. So with the generative part of search that Google's bringing out, we are seeing publishers being highlighted in a kind of different way than before. And it's at the top, it's kind of very specific to the topic you're searching to. So if you're searching for skincare, for example, you do see more publishers than e-com stores being referenced with their SEO content. So now if you go on to search, you do see a lot of e-com brands who are writing their own affiliate content. And for a user, that's not always the best experience because you're basically reading an ad. So there is a demand, I think, from consumers to get content that's user verified. So if it's not user generated, from a brand that they trust, but also going beyond just blue links. They want to see a human being. They want to see the product being used. And so for us, we do a lot of affiliate content. We do a lot of review content. So for us, it's kind of meant, how do we evolve how we already do things to adapt to this audience demand for video, for UGC? And for us, we've seen a lot of success when we go more from brand to the actual editors that we have on our teams. And it lets us kind of play in the UGC space without actively being UGC creators, because we highlight our editors as real people who are really trying products. So yeah, I guess it is kind of a loss in one way, but it's also a gain in a different way. And our job as publishers has always been to be where the audiences are. And if less people are getting the results they want from Google search, we have to respond to that. And I mean, Google's also responding to that. So the partnerships between Google and TikTok, for example, they are anticipating for this change. They're anticipating that people are searching with more natural language. They're anticipating that people want video content and first-person reviews. And as publishers, we've done things a certain way for a long time, especially reviews and especially kind of brand-led content. And it hasn't always meant that it's the best type of content. I mean, we know as SEO people, good SEO doesn't necessarily mean it's the best piece of content. So for us, it's always about, if audiences are demanding trust, authority, if they're demanding first-person reviews, and if they're demanding a human being on the other end of the screen, we need to adapt what we already have. And that sometimes means creating the same type of content in a different platform. So short form video, obviously there's a big focus for us there, but also kind of layering our content types, having a web page, having UGC in the web page, having that web page adapted for TikTok, adapted for video. So I guess for us, it's a creative exercise and a problem solving opportunity. And I don't know, I'm kind of excited for that because I think we've done things in the same way for such a long time. And I almost think that we've gotten a bit complacent. We've kind of been just churning out content that's so easy to automate that there isn't a reason to go to web pages anymore. And if Google can create the equivalent of your content, I think that really does bring into question, is your content going far enough to differentiate itself? Is it incentivizing people to come through to your website? And that's a threat for us, but an opportunity to be better publishers.
Love the optimism and the problem-solving mindset. Keith, from your perspective, particularly for news, particularly as we know, sometimes the search behavior, typically someone goes back and researches, if an event happens, someone then goes back and researches the backstory. What's your thoughts on sort of how to tackle the zero-click searches and SGE in that context, and maybe anything else that you might consider as advice for addressing zero-click searches?
Well, the first thing I'd say is you're talking about tactics, and the tactics will emerge. But I'd absolutely pull out from Nikki's statement. A couple of things she said really chime with me there. It's important to see this in a larger context. And the larger context is Google is struggling with the search experience, and the content community is struggling to provide through the search experience things which are actually satisfying to the user. And we're constantly trying to evolve that. And have exactly the same strategy broadly. We're looking more and more at search across TikTok and social platforms because that's where the behavior is going, because people are looking for different search experiences. So this SGE is just one part of an evolution that Google's trying to make to keep search relevant. And I don't think it'll be the only play. And I think SERPs are going to be very, very volatile in layout over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, and content will be volatile. And they're in their own internal war against not just the rise of AI generated content, which is already cannibalizing, and they're playing whack-a-mole trying to keep that under control, but the influence of, I guess, AI-like production procedures that Nikki's referencing, producing boilerplate content out of publishing that really doesn't satisfy an audience, even under the traditional SERP. But to get back to the tactics, look, I think the EEAT focus and the fundamentals of ranking are still going to sit there underneath the SGE, and we're really talking about a SERP change. And that extra, so all of the foundation is still going to be there. That extra layer is going to be, we are looking at this SERP change. And, initially they didn't really bring in anything in terms of, referral attribution and prominent, carousel style click-through. They've gone there now, but the real question is going to be whether the ranking inputs that actually take content and make it likely to be featured within an SGE snippet at that sort of above the foundation of ranking, that final last mile, if you like, and therefore being featured in the snippet, offering that click-through opportunity, whether that's going to be understandable in the same way that we do understand fairly well how to rank in top stories, carousels, signals of freshness, signals of topic authority, whether all of that still comes into play when we're looking at how content gets merged, mushed, treated as training data, and then regurgitated in these SGE environments. So I don't think we're going to know until we get experience of that at scale, and we start getting the data back to really crack that last mile piece of ranking.
Understood.
Did I actually answer your question?
Somewhat, but I think leaning more towards, you said, because we're going to go more towards the tactics, like particularly the news experience for search, how typically someone wants to go backwards and understand.
Yeah. So we've all exploited the explainer market for a while. And I think, we talk about query intent. So, we still see the main volume in simple entity-based search. So the last couple of days, let's say Bruce Lemon. But immediately you get sort of follow-up angles based on, where he lives, how much his rent was worth, backstory, family background, all of those sorts of things. And we've been able to mop up and produce service and utility journalism, and utilize our topic authority to really target that sort of content and follow-up query as well. And increasingly, it's more and more about the angles you choose to take post the sort of trunk, who, what, where, when, why, that actually give you the success in search. I think that is going to be challenged by summaries. So we're going to have to rethink a little bit, how we produce a range of coverage that, satisfies our readers, but equally starts to play into different approaches that are going to work in this SGE environment.
Okay, I guess still watch this space from what it sounds like. Okay, Nikki, there's on the sorry, you spoke about reviews, affiliate content. We're seeing perspectives come into the fold a lot more and all that. So how can brands and sites position themselves better, in your opinion, moving forward?
I think Perspectives is a really exciting tool for legacy brands in particular, and an opportunity to play in platforms that are dominated by user-generated content. So you've got YouTube, TikTok, those platforms are dominated by user-generated content. So Perspectives is an opportunity to, I guess, humanize your brand once again and to play with different platforms and different modes of content. We have a lot of standard web page affiliate kind of reviews on the site. So for us, it's about how do we highlight these stories in a way that works with UGC and on platforms that maybe we haven't really explored in that way before. So we know with Perspectives, it'll be highlighting different voices, different perspectives, and mostly gathering content from forums and social media. So for us, it's just about making sure that those pieces of content are found. So you're applying almost the same SEO practices across all these different platforms. I mean, the SEO basics of having, you know, long tail keywords, making sure that you've transcribed what's being said in the video, making sure that your images have alt text. I mean, it's all the basic SEO things. You're just kind of applying it to every single platform to make sure that Google is able to find it and highlight it. So I guess that's a big part of it, is educating our teams on the basics of search optimization across various platforms, and making sure that they have that knowledge and they're not just thinking of SEO as this is something you do for a page on our website. This is something that you do across every platform ever. And I think the second thing is to keep up with the demand for content. So consumer demand for content is just insane, and it's very hard for most teams to keep up with creating video content, podcasts. I mean, the list gets longer and longer every day. So for us, we kind of feel like we're at a pretty special time, because while the demand is growing, the tools to create these pieces of content are becoming better. So I think for us, a big part of it is making sure that teams are upskilling, like they're learning how to find gaps in their workflow and their content creation, whether that's finding, you know, peer-reviewed journals that support a product. If you're writing about beauty, for example, making sure that you're researching and using these tools to help you research and to improve the authority, the trust, and all of those aspects of your work. But also just streamlining things like alt text. There are really great AI scripts now where you can just put a picture in and it will generate alt text for you. It's a pretty tedious job and it's kind of boring for teams. And it's also something that they have to do more and more and more. So finding those gaps to help automate and streamline the content creation process is actually helping us be more agile and helping us be present across different platforms. So that's something we're really exploring with our e-com shopping content. How can it live on TikTok? We know that Pinterest is a huge platform for shopping and a huge platform for image search. We know that Instagram became a huge hub for shopping, and I can very much see that happening on TikTok now. You know, creators have Amazon storefronts. So we're trying to find where our audiences shop, and not just on search on Google, but on TikTok, on potentially Instagram Shorts and Instagram, and making sure that we're trying to divide our content up across these different platforms. So whenever people search and wherever they search, they're finding us. And it's a lot harder to compete in this space if you're not really a brand that has that brand authority. So for us and the zero-click experience, that's a huge threat, obviously, because people are not leaving SERPs to go to websites. So I think there's going to be a big focus on brand marketing and not just performance marketing, where you're really trying to be in your audience's mind at every point of search. So when they do search, they're thinking, I'm searching in this specific niche, whether it's beauty or fashion. For us, those are our niches, really. We want them to search with Vogue and GQ in mind. And we actually think this could be a great opportunity, because personalization is great. It tells you exactly what you've bought and what you should buy according to Google, according to your own taste. But when it comes to fashion and beauty, you actually do trust authority figures. Sorry, it's my alarm. You do trust authority figures. So you might actually want to know what a brand like Vogue, or I guess if you're in e-commerce, what a brand like Sephora might have to say about the best products. And if you're in fashion, you know, GQ and Vogue. So we just really want to make sure that we are kind of not just there when they come upon us. They're thinking of us at the beginning of the shopping journey and at the beginning of the funnel. So wherever they're searching and wherever they're looking for advice, they want our advice. And that's a very long-term project, but it just starts with being everywhere your audience is. So they're seeing you on Instagram, on TikTok, not in an obtrusive way, but in a way that they kind of just have you in the back of their mind when they're shopping at all times. And we already see this on basic search. So we have a lot of brand-led searches. So people do search, you know, Vogue jeans, Vogue moisturizers, Vogue sunscreens. So for us, it's not a huge leap. And that's just a lucky thing for being a legacy brand of, you know, 100+ years. but I do think that this is something that smaller brands can also leverage, especially if you have a point of difference. If your brand is known for sustainability, or if your brand is known for having specific values, I think value-led searches are also getting quite popular. So, you know, it's all a challenge and an opportunity at all times. But for us, it's just making these little tweaks to how we do things, and hoping that, you know, it works. Because as Kif said, it's all experimentation, right? Like this whole industry is experimentation and trying and changing. And there'll be a lot more of that maybe in the next year than we're used to. But we've done it before. You know, we made the leap from web pages to sharing on Facebook. We made the leap from web pages sharing on Instagram. We made the leap from newspapers to websites. So the industry has evolved with audiences for many, many years. And I think that we are more than capable of doing it in the next 24 months, for sure.
Thanks, Nikki. I think that's a really good closing remark. And yeah, sorry, keep over to you.
Yeah, can I just pick up on one? I think the UGC theme is really interesting. And I think if you look across a lot of these, you know, thematic changes in the industry and thematic changes in the platforms and their algorithms that we're looking for, what they're trying to deal with is almost to get to the authority of more personalized content. I mean, that was rife in the helpful content update and the reviews update. Everything is they're looking for the direct experience of a person with a subject. And that's a really interesting challenge for us, to maintain an institutional voice of the brand, but to bring those individual voices within the brand to the fore. Because I think, you know, across the board, that's going to be algorithmically a place we need to go in content strategy over the next 2 or 3 years. And it's something we're talking about very actively across all of the newsrooms, bringing through talent and letting talent express itself in a far greater variety of digital ways than we perhaps have done in the past.
We've got a few minutes left, so I just want to pass it over just for Q&A. There's a ton more things that we could have spoken about. I've spoken to you guys separately at length of other things, but maybe we could pass it over to the audience with their questions on maybe immediate challenges or immediate advice they can get with this current changing landscape.
But just in lieu of a question, to your point of immediacy, I think we've still got a bit of time. I think Google moved into the market quickly, but they're very aware that, you know, news in particular is a difficult space to operate in. You're open to liability. Hallucinations are a massive problem. Equally, I think they probably feel broadly regulatorily exposed over the long term for the use of the content industry's content to generate their own. And it's no secret that, you know, in our head office, there are negotiations going on. Robert Thompson has always spoken publicly that they're in negotiations with large content providers to build out some sort of commercial arrangement that would perhaps set a regulatory framework as well. So I think we've got a bit of time.
Yeah, definitely there is, but it just, yeah, it's more of a warning for us to get moving. Not maybe as long as the mobile first index. That took 10 years, but maybe a bit more sooner than that. But okay, I think with that, sorry, there's no questions, but we're almost we're pretty much out of time. So Kif, Nikki, really appreciate your time, and definitely reach out. Sorry, everyone on the call as well, definitely connect with Nikki and Kif. I've had extensive conversations on Search, so they're very knowledgeable in this space. So thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to just conclude the event for today. I'd like to thank all our sponsors and all our partners that have especially gave us the opportunity to make this event to the point, very productive and hopefully helpful to our audience. So thank you to Ezoic, our main principal sponsor, Source Fabric, SmartOper, and Glide for being supporting partners. And with that, I wish you guys good day, good morning, good evening. For me, it's good night. So thanks everyone, and we'll speak soon.